Okay, good evening.
Can I get some water, please?
Today the lecture topic is wisdom behind the ceremony. Dr. Nalini Jayasuriya, the senior lecturer in the Academy of Physics Academy. After that, I'll have to remind you about the registration, annual session. There are about more than 8 40 speakers are coming there. There's a lot of workshop. Please register annual session. Okay.
Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I think I have to be in front of the camera. So, this is regarding wisdom tooth removal. First, how many of you all? I was expecting to see a bigger crowd, but it's going on live. So, most of you all have done wisdom teeth removal, right? Okay. So this patient came to my clinic, and she had got her left side wisdom tooth removed 2 years back. Okay. And now she doesn't feel her left side of the tongue. And now she came to me to get the right side removed. She said, I went to 5 other dental surgeons and they refused. Why? Because she's already not having the other side. She doesn't feel the other side. So she said, doctor, I have a lot of pain here. My other side wisdom is paining now, but when I go, nobody wants to do that because they are scared. So what I expect to discuss here today is that few aspects where you would have issues. That means when we practice, so if you're when you have done wisdom teeth removal, when you have done any kind of work only, you will know what are the problems that you had. So if there were very new people who had not done any wisdoms, then this presentation won't make much sense. So this is adult learning where you reflect on what you have done, and by what I will tell, if you can learn few things, at least one thing which will change your practice in the future, that's the target. Okay. So this patient comes to you. If this patient comes to you in the, out of the audience, who would do this surgery? Can you raise your hand if you're happy to do this surgery? The right side wisdom. Does that mean nobody would like to do that? Okay, thanks for being honest. Now, when in OMS surgery, if somebody comes after a trauma and has a blowout fracture, those who are SHOs and registrars, they know, we will not touch the eye with the blowout fracture if the other side eye is blind. Because if something goes wrong for some reason, the patient is going to end up totally blind. So this patient would end up totally not feeling food if you make a mistake. So we are scared. So there is some component in you which is telling you, don't touch this. So that means you are not confident. So what we want to learn is to be confident, because right side third molar is not a big deal compared to the left side. You can see that the left side is very deep. Okay. So objectives of this presentation is that you should be able to select your case confidently. So in a way that's good, because you select your case, the case that you are confident to do. That's the most important thing. And then you have to prepare your surgical environment. In my practice, personal experience, I feel that the most important thing for me is the surgical, the environment and the instruments. Obtaining a consent. So you should be, will discuss certain things. Let's see whether you will learn something about getting consent. And then understanding the steps in doing the surgery. So these are the objectives. So by the end of this 1 hour presentation, if you can, put 3 points into this, you have learned something, and we have, achieved something. So we are going to start learning swimming by sitting here. So what we have to understand is you get the basic information and start practicing, because this is a practice. So most important thing is selecting your case and then practicing. Otherwise you will also be sitting at the floor of the swimming pool trying to read how to swim. Okay. So just to have a, the formality, my lectures I try to make it a bit different, but we need to have certain things, certain slides. So they say that these are studies combined, so different populations, different countries, they have different values, but all together combined found this in a textbook. So there's a 17 to 32% prevalence of wisdom teeth, and they are saying this is more common in females, and also prevalence is gradually increasing. So as a OMS surgeon and budding OMS surgeon, we don't have to be scared. There's a lot of wisdom teeth coming in the future. Why people are preserving their teeth more? Now, if children get their molars extracted early, then there would be a mesial drift. So we would expect favorable third molars to erupt rather than getting stuck. So the trend is actually it's becoming more impacted. But once in a while we find wisdom teeth which are missing. So that may be the next trend, but I don't think that will come within our lifetime. So as I said, the attrition is less because our dietary pattern is different, and also teeth are not extracted much. So when a patient comes to 20s, still they are retaining most of their teeth. So the wisdom won't have a chance to come out. So one thing, the most important thing is selecting your patient. We get different patients asking for surgeries. We have different setups in working. The government setup, those who are working for the government, others for the private sector. So both working in these, people working in both these setups find patients to be different, and how we deal in most of the sets are different. But here I think we are dealing majority to the private sector, and here selecting the patient is very important, because then only your procedure is going to be successful, patient is going to be happy, and you are going to be happy. Okay. So I visit different clinics, and sometimes I get patients from dental surgeons asking to remove this wisdom tooth. I fall into trouble when I find out that there's no indication. Why should I remove this? But some they try to be nice and maybe put this guy to give a wisdom tooth. But so most important thing is, if there's no indication, don't extract, because earlier there was a practice like that, especially in the US, where all wisdoms should be extracted. But then gradually they found out that complications were becoming more common. So now there are guidelines, and then patient factors. So we all know how to find out from the medical dental history whether a patient is suitable for a surgery. So I'm not going to go into details. And there are some tooth related factors. I feel that is very important because that is something that we have to evaluate by looking at the patient, by looking at the x-rays. We have to decide whether these tooth related factors are favorable and are we confident. Okay. And the surgical setup. If you are not happy with the surgical setup, don't do surgeries. I don't know whether it's applicable to you, but it's applicable to me. Sometimes even in the Peradini faculty, MOT, when I go for surgery, they don't have proper burrs and the handpiece is not working properly. So then if you try to do surgeries, you are falling into trouble, the patient is falling into trouble. So make sure all those things are the way that you want so that you can do the procedure. So coming back to the guidelines, so there's a huge list of indications why you should extract a tooth. But I don't want to go into details. You can read this. So most important thing is, if there's no indication, don't remove it. So patient factors: is the patient medically fit? Is the mouth opening adequate? Is the tooth accessed easily? So medically fit part I am not going to elaborate because that's a simple thing. You should find out whether the patient has medical issues, taking medicine. That's a basic thing. But there are other things that we easily overlook. Whether the patient can open the mouth properly and whether the tooth is accessed easily. There are certain patients, they have so much of cheek fat that you can barely see the tooth. Just because your patient is uncooperative, don't try to change your field. Select the better patients. Select the patients that you are comfortable doing. So the most important thing is doing surgery. And when you are starting to do surgery, if you select a bad case, you are going to be discouraged. So this cartoon says a physician, because he didn't like his uncooperative patients, became a vet. Now he can't take his patient to the clinic. So all the patients are the same, either a root canal filling, crown, whatever. Still you select your patient, especially for surgery, and then it will be interesting. Facial figures, sometimes this is what I told you. I don't have a choice because there has to be a draining point, but I struggle with patients who have less mouth opening, big fat in the cheeks, and the B kind of facial figures. So very difficult to reach the tooth, very difficult to remove bone. You have to be extremely careful not to damage the lips and other structures. But some days it's a blessing when you get a patient who can widely open the mouth, there's no fat, and the tooth is nicely visible. It's a 5-10 minutes job. So select your patient. Addition to this, how much the patient can open the mouth, and also the cheek retraction. So sometimes you can't do that. So when you commit to a surgery, when you start a surgery, when you struggle, then only the complications happen. That I will come to later. Once you find that the patient's mouth opening is less, you can't see, and then you have now started, you want to finish it, and then you are trying to somehow take the tooth out because your ego is such that you want to somehow take it out, then only you get complications. So think about this. So tooth-related factors. This is interesting. So this is a picture from the Winters classification that I studied when I was undergraduate. So it talks about the place of application of force, the red line, the level of the bone in the distal part, and whether the tooth is in the occlusal level, the blue line. So this gives you an idea whether this is a favorable tooth for you or not. But personally, when you see a tooth in the mouth, usually that's an easy case. The tooth has erupted into the mouth. So basically a good chance that it will be a relatively easy case. So it's not the forum, but more into if you can visualize a third molar that you have done and was very difficult for you. How was it? Can you all think for 1 minute a third molar that you did and you struggled to take out? So if you all had pens and papers, I would have asked you to draw that, but it's alright. Just think about a third molar. How was it? How was it deep? Was the roots bulky? Was it a mesial angular? Was it a distoangular? Was it a vertical? Was it a horizontal? So think about that. So we have different patterns of impactions. It depends on the degree of angulation to the occlusal plane. You don't have to remember these. It's just a classification. So if there's a 10-degree either way change, it's a vertical. If it's more than 10 to 80, it's mesioangular. So these are mostly if you're into research kind of things, but this is not a big deal. You don't want to know whether it was actually a mesioangular or horizontal that you removed, if you have removed it. So just for the knowledge, this is how you classify. But personally, I feel that this Pell and Gregory classification, that's the best one. Here he describes 3 levels. Can you see ABC? So ABC tells you in A, the crown of the impacted tooth is between the top of the occlusal plane and the cervical margin. So if it is at that level, it's going to be a easy one, relatively easy. But then B, below that, and then C, going deeper into that. And then there's a 1, 2, 3. 1 means the whole crown is outside the ramus. So there's no bone covering the tooth. That's the easy one. And when it is half, it's 2, and it's way in, it's 3. So now you can imagine 1A would be a easy one, but C3 is going to be a very difficult one, right? So this diagram shows a few slides which shows you that ABC and level 1, 2, 3. So look at this when you get a impaction, and then you decide whether this is going to be a easy one or whether it's going to be a difficult one. There are other things. So if you're like in the lower left picture, if the root surface is divergent and it's larger than the crown area, the cervical area. That part doesn't want to come out. But if it is conical, you're lucky, it will come out easily. So these are difficult ones. So here you have to identify, and we'll discuss how to overcome this. And I won't go more details regarding the other factors, but you have to think about the 7. The 7 will try to come out. I have had personal experience where the 7, becomes loose, but then I keep the finger there and remove the 8. So don't let the 7 come out, but it can move a little, but it's not going to harm very much. But be careful, especially when you have these conical shaped root patterns. So we'll be going, when we come to the consent, we'll talk about, we'll tell this to the patient as well, because that could be a complication if you don't pay attention to. And the most feared one is the nerve relationship. So these are the textbook pictures, diagrams showing that the nerve relationship. So what they try to highlight here is that the 2 white lines, when you see the X-ray, you see 2 white lines called the tram lines. So that shows the cortical area where the nerve is going. So that is distinct in the first upper diagram, but in the lower it shows a intimate relationship with the root, so that there is a root darkening, and also that the tram line has disappeared. Okay, so that's a sign of the root and the nerve being very close. I am referring to the inferior alveolar nerve. So root darkening, especially with the white line missing. Here the white line is not missing, but when the white line is missing, that shows a very intimate relationship. Sometimes you will find roots having acute bends. These may also be a bit tricky. Sometimes you see parts of the root apex missing. Sometimes you see other changes, and you will see the ID canal moving away from the tooth. So these are described as big danger signs. In Peradeniya, we are fortunate we have a cone beam CT, so that tells us, gives a better picture regarding the actual relationship. And I believe when the new DI comes up, you are going to have a sophisticated cone beam CT, so this will be helpful for you. So cases like this that you see in the X-ray, you can go for further investigations to clarify if you are interested in doing that case. So there's a huge we call an armamentarium. So you have a lot of instruments here. There's a big trend, especially in my practice. If I don't think about the instruments, I get a lot of things which are useless. I mean, here for a lower wisdom you get upper forceps, but you don't see the lower forceps. Like that, it's very important that you select your instruments. One thing that I really like is the mouth. So when you ask the patient to keep the mouth open, it's very difficult. But when you ask the patient to bite on this rubber, it's much more comfortable. So this is a this is a small gadget which is very not expensive, but helps you a great deal. So that should be something that you should add if you have not used it earlier. They say that in humans there's less muscles used when we are biting, I mean having this bitten, rather than trying to keep it open. So then the strain on the patient is less. So personally I found this very, very important. And then sometimes Warwick James or the Cryers, Couplands, and some clinics when I go, I find the Coupland, the gutter is chipped off, so it doesn't actually give the lever effect. So when you are struggling to take out a root part, and if you can't get that lever effect which is the Coupland supposed to give, if you remember your undergraduates, Coupland has a gutter shape where it should give a lever effect when you rotate. But if part of that is already broken, it's not going to do that. And you should have all three sizes. Sometimes you try to split a tooth, and when you put the Coupland in and turn, it doesn't fracture because the Coupland is small, you don't have the bigger one. So make sure that you have all your instruments. Some patients, they are going abroad early, soon after your surgery, so then I will have white quill sutures. Like this, you decide whether your earlier practice was comfortable, whether you want to change some things. Because personally, I have found that actively selecting my instruments have helped me a great deal. So just highlighting the mouth prop. So we are coming to informed consent. I know this is one of the most tricky things. If you tell all the complications, the patient doesn't come to you again. So are you going to tell a lie? How much are you going to tell? So those who have gone in a plane, once you go in, will the pilot come to you and tell the plane can crash? It can, when I'm taking off, it can either hit something and fall down, or either I might decide to commit suicide and take you guys down. So is the pilot going to tell all those things? No. What they are saying is that these are the exits that if you want to go out. So when you talk about all the complications, the patients get scared. But if you don't talk about complications, then you fall in trouble. So where do we stand? Usual guideline in UK is that if the temporary complications are less than 5%, you don't need to tell them. And if the permanent complications are less than 0.5%, you don't need to tell them. So maybe you can not talk about the fracture of the bone. But the other tricky thing is that you should decide by looking at the X-ray. That means for EC ones, you can't talk about all the complications listed here. Is it fair? I mean, just for your sake, this will happen in the government sector. In Peradeniya, they have a huge list where the patient reads and then have to write down what they have read. So one of our Dr. Indura, you must be knowing, he came with a patient, and then once the patient's writing this down, he was telling, I'm surprised that the patients don't get scared, I mean, we should do a study on how this affects the patient's mentality. But what's wrong there? Because we give the consent just before the surgery. Ideally, you have to give the consent 24 hours before the surgery. So once the patient comes to your clinic and if you're going to start the surgery, you can't give the consent. So it's not valid. Because patient doesn't have time to think, patient doesn't have time to say no, patient might not have time to read about it, patient doesn't have time to complain, or maybe patient now has come to a level that it's inevitable. So if you're really into consent, which you should be, but make sure that you talk to the patient early about the complications, and you don't have to talk about extremely rare conditions if you think that they are unlikely according to the case. So if you think there's the jaw is very weak and the tooth is very buried deep into the bone and there's a high chance of fracture, you can tell about that. But in a Pell and Gregory 1A, this may be very unlikely, so you don't have to talk about that. And the other thing is that the way that we tell a problem. For example, if I ask you to now think for a minute how you would tell a patient about the lingual nerve anesthesia. Just think for half a second how you would tell your patient that this procedure can cause temporary or permanent numbness. Any volunteers to tell you what they thought? Anybody wants to volunteer? How you would tell a patient about the lingual nerve? So what I believe is that when you tell, I can tell a patient, this is what I am hearing from students, when we do the surgery, your lingual nerve is going very close to the third molar, so there's a chance that it can get damaged. Usually it may be temporary, but sometimes it is permanent. When you hear that, you get scared, obviously. Who wants to have your half the tongue not feeling anything? So they would go to the other dental surgeon or the OMS surgeon, and that guy won't tell anything and remove the tooth. So where do we stand? So I can't go into all aspects, but I am just telling you what I do. What I am saying is that it's true. There's a nerve going close to your tooth which supplies your tongue. Okay, so there is a chance when you remove the tooth that it can happen. But do you know how I take steps to protect it? I put depending on the level of intelligence, you can say, I am putting a small instrument which I will be temporarily taking your nerve out of the way. So I'm going to take care that your nerve is not going to get damaged during this surgery. So that is how I am going to protect and do this. So like that, I mean, you tell a complication and you have to tell how you are actively trying to prevent that. So I think then people would be more understanding. Yeah, there can be problems, but this is how it's going to happen. So actually, lingual nerve permanent damage is very rare, but it can happen even with anesthesia. So when you give anesthesia and if you give the nerve, if you inject into the nerve and compress, the nerve can get permanently anesthetized. So in local anesthesia complications, there are lingual nerve damage. So there can be problems, but you can't be covering everything here. So try to think about it. So you have a complication, you talk to the patient and you tell that how you are going to prevent this complication. So that I have found that people like that, and they become less scared in getting the procedure done. So these are some of the figures. These are not Sri Lankan. In Peradeniya we are actually doing a study now to see what are the complications. So still we don't know actual complication rate in Sri Lanka. But one thing about that, taking the nerve out, you can actually get a transient lingual nerve anesthesia for about 1 or 2 weeks. I have got that. Patients tell the nerve is still numb, will it recover after a few days? But the good thing is that earlier it was half the tongue, but now it's gradually reducing. So it's reducing is a good sign. So inflammation can also cause lingual nerve to have this feeling. And other thing is that when you are putting the stitches, don't take very deep bites, and sometimes think about the lingual nerve. When you are suturing the buccal flap to the lingual side, sometimes your needle or you may be tightly suturing the lingual nerve as well. So if the patient continues to have complete half the tongue anesthesia on the second day, I would think about removing the suture. So this shows what I told earlier. So mesioangular ones are easier, horizontal ones are graded 2, what do you know, vertical ones are graded 3, distoangular 4. This is according to the difficulty. And then Pell and Gregory A and 1. So difficulty index, so if you score 3 to 4, that's going to be a relatively simple extraction, surgical removal, whereas moderate would be 5 to 6, and then very difficult 5 to 10. So coming back to our previous case, so this side we had to remove. So what are the problems here? Is it a very difficult extraction? Because the crown level is above the cervical area. The root pattern is not very clear, but it looks like in this one it's better. It has a conical shape. So when you take the distal bone, there's only a little bit cover, and it's actually not a very difficult one. So my next part of the lecture discussion here is going to be about how to surgically remove a wisdom tooth. So the most important thing that I learned is that you should whenever possible section the tooth. Trying to take out the whole tooth is going to be very difficult. So sectioning the tooth is going to be the easiest way. So you have to section the crown either into 1 or 2 parts where you can take it out completely, or else and then you have to go on to the roots. So that's a very that's a important step which I found after doing that made my surgical removals very easy. When you try to take out both roots together, they don't like to come out. So once you split, very easily you can take them out. So this is the side that someone knocked the lingual nerve. Another tip that I want to give you is that I know as dental surgeons, I tell this to students now, that we have a big ego. If you can't extract a tooth, that's like the biggest shame in our life. But why should it be? So in the cases, especially patients whom I put under general anesthesia, I tell them that once you wake up, I will come and tell you, sorry, I left a part of the tooth inside. But why I did that? If I tried to take that out, there would have been a good chance that I would have knocked one of your nerves. So that is one method that I do to protect the nerves. So can you remember, I mean, going back, I told there are certain things that I would do to protect your nerve. So this is one thing. If I tell you that, sorry, I didn't want to take it out. And one time in my practice, I had one patient and under GE I removed the tooth. The last root, it didn't want to come out. It was very mobile and there's something stuck. So I applied a little bit more force and small sound came and the root came out. And I found that 1/3 of the root was fractured and it was going into the lingual space because it was already perforating the lingual the bone. That's how the root was. I had an assistant and he was telling, so we'll take it out. I could feel with my finger the part of the root in the lingual side. Personally, at that time, I didn't have any experience of having a root part in the lingual side. I teach, but I didn't have a experience. I was thinking, one thing that if I try to take this out, there's a good chance the lingual nerve will go. And other thing is that I might push this into the submandibular space or God knows where. So best thing is it's there and I'm going to come out. After the patient recovered, I explained that there was a root part and it was left behind and I didn't want to take it out because then it could knock your nerves out. The patient was perfectly alright. So and fortunately patient didn't have any problems up to date. It's about 1 month ago. So this is the patient's own tooth, and if the tooth is not infected, definitely no issues. So you are just leaving a part of the patient inside, that's all. But if you try to feed your ego and somehow drill and take it out, there's a good chance that you will do some damage. I have when I was in Australia, I have done with my consultant 2 lingual nerve repairs, and both cases when we open up, we see the whole lingual plate all eaten up. For some reason, the whole lingual plate is all gone. So that means the dental surgeon has, for some reason done something, and that's how the whole lingual plate has got damaged. And there are studies to show that if you engage the burr into that nerve, that gives the worst kind of damage because the nerve will entangle around the burr. But if you cut the nerve, there's a chance it will regrow. But if you apply the burr, it's going to have a permanent damage. So be careful. If you think it's not going to work out, stop it. It's going to save you a lot of stress. You just have to say, I couldn't take it out, that's it. So it's the time now. Yeah. Almost gone. I just want to highlight one thing. So I'm going to show a video that will be the last one, about 5 minutes. So we'll be finishing on time. So if you have the 7 here, and if you have the 8 like this, so what I told you is that split the roots. Okay. One thing that I personally found where the roots are, you will not have a good orientation of your bifurcation. So the tip that I want to tell you here is that before you cut the crown, have a vertical orientation about your percation and where you want to split. And then after this, you can go on with your crown split. Is this clear? So, just to summarize, in a tooth like this, I would first make a vertical groove in the tooth in the axis that I want to make the split, the root split. And then I would on that make the other one. And on a distoangular tooth, this is the 7. So in a tooth like this, cutting like this would be taking it out first and then. So I can't go on with all the tooth field, but what you have to realize is that when you have areas where it will not come out, try to split it. If this had another root like this, we'll have split here. Because both of them don't want to come together. If they come, you're lucky. But if you split it here, they come out very easily. So it's going to take about 5 minutes. So like I said, the instrument tray is extremely important. I really make sure that the instruments are correct. And this is the tooth we are going to surgically remove today, giving local anesthesia. When we give local anesthesia, we want to start the surgery in 5-10 minutes. Don't do that. Give one 3 ml. I give another 3 ml. You for a 70 kilogram man, you can give a 21 ml. So be liberal in giving 1 or 2 cartridges and waiting for a reasonable time. Personally, I have seen how patients become comfortable when they are really knocked out. So good anesthesia is the key. So here you can see the external oblique ridge incision. So and then the sulcular incision along the 8 and 7, and if you want, you can make a vertical incision down so that it will be a 3-sided flap. It doesn't matter what kind of flap that you are fond of. The most important thing is that you should get a very clear view of the field. Having a not so clear view will only make things worse for you. And the lighting is also very important. If you don't see, it's going to be a big problem. So here we see that after the mucoperiosteal flap, you make sure that you are in bone, and then you are going to the distal part, retromolar area, and raising the flap. In this retromolar area, some people have a small artery. Don't worry, it will stop bleeding. After that, I like a Fisher burr, and then like this, you make a gutter shape bone removal around the tooth. And here they are keeping the lingual side protected with the sucker. And here this is the plan. This is the plan how to section the tooth. I'm not sure whether they make the vertical groove first, but that's how I do. But they have sectioned the crown part. Crown nose into 2 segments and then taking it out. Personally, I like to put the periosteal elevator and slightly reflect the lingual side and keep it protected. So now you see that the crown part is removed. So when we make a gutter like that, sometimes you want to remove middle part of the bone that you can collapse the side touching the 7. So the lower part of the crown is also sectioned and taken out. So it's very important that you go deep to apply force, otherwise you can't take it out. So now the whole crown part is taken out. Here the roots. Sometimes if your cut goes very nicely, it will automatically section the teeth at the roots, or else you section the roots and then. So the most important thing is, once you remove the crown part, you lose the direction. You lose the idea how the roots are positioned. So either you make the vertical cut initially, or you constantly have a good look at the X-ray and try to correlate that you get a good orientation. So once everything is out, you do a thorough cleanup, and if you find any bony sharp points, trim with the burr, and then you put the sutures. Some people like round burrs, but I fell in trouble one day using a round burr, because once you're trimming the cortical bone, accidentally you trim the tooth as well. So personally, I like the Fisher burr. If somebody is new to this, I would advise strongly to stick to a Fisher burr, so that you can nicely make that gutter removal of the bone around the tooth. And also sectioning is more perfect, and it's very easy to break with the toothless. If you have a round burr, that will remove a lot of unnecessary tooth structure, which will give you less tooth structure to support your extraction. So in summary, we discussed, I told you, good anesthesia is a key part. Sometimes we feel that the patient is having pain, is anesthetized, but still lying about pain. People don't lie about pain. So, and it's not your right to judge whether that person is lying or not. Somebody says pain, you stop. You can't do anything beyond that. Either you give intraligamentary, intrapulpal, other methods of anesthesia after you have started, or else at the beginning wait till you get good anesthesia. So that's the key part. Mouth prop and other instruments, very important. Good cheek retractor helps in protecting the cheek as well. Good flap pan exposure, protect the lingual side if necessary. Section the tooth so that you can take out in small parts. Difficult, stop it. Don't try to be too brave, and control your ego. Okay, thank you.